Looking for something to read? Well, these are the books that I've written. Hop on down to the description to find the Amazon links for all 4 of them, and keep your eyes open for more in the future. With that said, on to the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni Viewer, and welcome to Genre Benders, Obscurities, and Flawed Gems, where we look at the best stuff you've never heard of. Today we venture back into the realm of concept albums to look at what is perhaps one of the craziest musical sagas ever composed. These are the first 3 albums in the discography of Gloryhammer.
Are you sure about this, Omni? There has been some controversy with this band as of late.
I'm aware of that, Snazzy, and I'll address it when the time is right. First, though, introductions are in order. This is Christopher Bowes, an eccentric metal musician from the Highlands of Scotland. He's got various musical projects under his belt, but the one that propelled him to headliner status is the pirate-themed folk metal band Ailstorm, for which he is both lead singer and guitarist.
Yes, he plays the guitar. I told you he was eccentric.
After several albums cementing Ailstorm's status, Bowes set out to make a new project in the realm of symphonic power metal, which he called Gloryhammer.
This wouldn't just be a band. This would be a storytelling experience in which each band member would appear in costume as one of the characters from the story being told.
And who are these characters? Let's go down the list.
For lead vocals, we have Thomas Winkler as Angus MacFife, Crown Prince of Dundee. On guitar, Paul Templing as Sir Proletius, leader of the Knights of Crail. On bass is James Cartwright as the Hootsman, the immortal barbarian warrior. On drums is Ben Turk as Ralathor, the mysterious hermit of Cowdenbeath. As for Bowes himself, he would continue keyboard duties in the role of Zargothrax, the evil sorcerer and villain of the story.
With the band assembled, recording began, and in 2013, Gloryhammer would make its grand debut. At a glance, it might seem like Tales from the Kingdom of Fife is just another fantasy-themed album in an ocean of fantasy-themed albums, since that's the genre most commonly associated with power metal.
In some ways, that observation is true. There's no denying that it is a fantasy story, but as fantasy stories go, it's got plenty of quirkiness to it. For example, the story begins with a kingdom being laid to waste by hordes of zombie unicorns. Bet you never heard Ronnie James Dio sing about that.
No, but if he had, there would have been a rainbow in there somewhere.
Oh, undoubtedly, but that's beside the point.
Tales brings us back to the 10th century AD, where the sorcerer Zargothrax conquers the Scottish kingdom of Dundee with those aforementioned undead unicorns, entombing the kingdom's princess in ice as he does. However, he is unable to kill Prince Angus MacFife, heir to Dundee's throne, and the prince swears to defeat the wizard and save his kingdom. To that end, he must journey across the Highlands to gather relics and allies that will make victory possible, including the Hammer of Glory, the mightiest weapon in all the land.
Like I said, there's a lot of quirkiness to this album, especially regarding how over-the-top it is.
The rules of this world are just this side of being cartoon logic, presenting stuff that would be considered fantasy even by fantasy standards. Angus MacFife is such an adept warrior that he can kill enemies in a single verse. We briefly visit Crail, a place populated entirely by knights who spend all of their time fighting, either against enemies or each other for practice. Zargothrax's motivation goes unspoken, meaning he basically conquers Dundee solely because he's evil. My personal favorite is how a magic prison at the end is made of a substance called liquid ice.
Liquid ice? Isn't that just water?
Normally yes, but here it's meant to be something else because this is a really crazy over-the-top fantasy story. You see, that's the kind of ridiculousness you're gonna find in this album.
Then you have the visual aspect of the band, which has a lot of detail put into realizing the looks of each character. Angus is clad in bright green armor, possibly in reference to the Arthurian legend of the Green Knight. Sir Proletius has a coat of arms displayed on his blue and white tunic. The Hootsman is clad in wolfskins, as if actively provoking PETA to throw red paint on him. Ralathor has a blue cape and cowl that lends a sense of mystery to him, but it's different in design from Zargothrax's black and silver cloak.
It's clear that these costumes were not just thrown together, but had actual thought put into them.
This told power metal fans at the time that there was something different about Gloryhammer, and that difference included a sense of whimsy to it.
With that being said, of the 3 albums in this initial trilogy, Tales from the Kingdom of Fife definitely plays it safe.
For all of its quirkiness, the album is still a Tolkien-esque fantasy album in a sea of Tolkien-esque fantasy albums, with the kind of music one would expect from such an album. The story also ends as you would expect. Zargothrax is defeated, Dundee is saved, and Angus MacFife reigns supreme.
In order to really stand out from the pack, the band would have to forge a more distinct identity going forward. And with their second album, they would do that in spades.
I wanna set the universe on fire, feel it burn tonight.
Before we get into it, I'd like to take a moment to just appreciate that title. Space 1992, Rise of the Chaos Wizards. That's the kind of title that instantly grabs your attention. Even without listening to a single note on the album, you already know from that you're gonna be in for something different. And boy howdy is this album different.
Okay, so this album takes place 1,000 years after the first album in the distant future of 1992. It seems that the epic battle between Angus MacFife and Zargothrax is the turning point for an alternate history in which Dundee becomes a global superpower that eventually grows into an intergalactic empire spanning the cosmos.
For centuries there was peace, but that's come to an end.
A new cult known as the Chaos Wizards has managed to release Zargothrax from his prison of liquid ice so he can resume his conquest of Scotland. This requires Prince Angus MacFife XIII to reunite his ancestors' allies for another battle. However, nobody is prepared for Zargothrax's real plan, and defeating him this time around will come at a very high price.
The influence this time around is from the likes of Star Wars and Warhammer 40,000, transposing the usual fantasy tropes into an over-the-top sci-fi setting.
Dragons are now made of metal, dwarves and goblins live on other planets, magic artifacts run on alien technology, and on it goes. It might seem like just a new coat of paint, but it really does make a big difference.
Remember, the first album primarily stood out due to its tongue-in-cheek quirkiness, and moving from fantasy straight into sci-fi is a natural way of extending that quirkiness.
As for the music, we have something that sounds more 80s inspired than the last album. Whereas the keyboards on Tales were used to imitate harpsichords and trumpets for a medieval sound, here they're used to create computerized atmosphere.
This is most noticeable in Universe on Fire, as you heard for yourself during the intro segment.
However, Space 1992 never indulges in self-awareness regarding its premise or its music. You might think the album is aiming for maximum irony and meta-humor given that Angus XIII is wearing green Iron Man armor, but this odd visual gag aside, the album never jokes about its premise.
It would of course be very easy to add self-awareness to an album in which astral dwarves fight demons on Mars, but never once is it done.
Not that the story is meant to be taken seriously, of course.
Well, no, it is already ridiculous by design, but everyone already knows that, so there's no need to point it out.
If you listen to Gloryhammer, that means you're automatically in on the joke. You know how crazy it all is, but that's part of why you like it. The mindset is one about just having fun with the insanity of it all. It's cheesy, yes, but that cheese is 100% authentic, hence why it works.
The album ends with the Hootsman making a heroic sacrifice to end Zargothrax's universe-destroying plan, but unfortunately his sacrifice winds up destroying the Earth in the process.
Well, shoot. With Earth destroyed, where does the story go from there?
That was the lingering question, and nobody could have predicted where it would go next. So, how crazy can one story possibly get? Let's find out with Legends from Beyond the Galactic Terror Vortex.
As mentioned, the Hootsmen had to destroy Earth to stop Zargothrax's plan on the previous album. It turns out the force of that act was so great that it tore a hole in the fabric of space and time, into which the evil wizard fled. Angus XIII naturally followed him in, and now they've both wound up back on Earth in an alternate dimension. However, since they entered at different times, Zargothrax arrived centuries before Angus, which means he was able to conquer the galaxy unopposed. Angus lands in a world already lost to evil, where the Knights of Krail now serve as Zargothrax's personal army, and his hammer is completely drained of its magic. Angus must now find a way to recharge his ancestral weapon, which requires him to ally himself with the Hoots Force, a resistance army that hails the Hootsman despite the fact that he's dead and gone. Or is he?
The mindset for this album seems to have been dumping everything in the toy chest out onto the floor and using whatever is there however you want.
Armies of mismatched monsters? Present and accounted for. A warrior prince with a hammer and a jetpack? Makes sense to me. Submarines that can fly through space? I can't think of a reason why that wouldn't work.
It's a philosophy that's just this side of anything goes, but it never goes so far as to break suspension of disbelief.
How could it? My disbelief was shattered by the first album.
Fair point, Snazzy, fair point, but honestly, who's complaining?
In terms of music, it seems a balance has been struck between the styles of the first and second albums, blending the medieval and futuristic together into a sonic experience that reflects the strange alternate world the album takes place in.
Beyond that, it doesn't really break any new ground in terms of musical experimentation, but the music is still good, so that's fine.
The album brings this first bit of the story to a bittersweet ending. Thanks in large part to the Hootsman, who apparently ascended to godhood in this new reality, Zargothrax is finally killed for good, but so is Angus the 13th. It seems that Zargothrax managed to stab him with a knife of evil that would turn him into a wicked tyrant, so he dives into an active volcano, allowing him to die a hero rather than live long enough to become a villain. The hero is gone, but evil is vanquished. For the moment.
I realize that up to this point I've been focusing on the lunacy of these albums, but I will be honest, there is more beneath the surface that keeps listeners coming back. If we go back briefly to the very first album, the very first track we ever hear in this story is the ambient song Anstruther's Dark Prophecy, which contains this line of dialogue.
The prophecy is written. Dundee will fall.
Well, that's foreboding.
Indeed, and it sets the tone for everything that follows.
What we have here is a prophecy that Dundee, the kingdom at the heart of this story, is doomed, and this is spoken by a guy whose very name implies that his word is sooth. The fall of Dundee is treated as a question of when, not if, and the villain declares that if it is inevitable, he will therefore be the cause of it and reign supreme in the aftermath.
In light of this, we can now see that the heroes aren't just fighting against an evil wizard, but against fate itself.
They stand united in defiance of this dark destiny, and they will do whatever it takes to prevent it, whether that means fighting for eternity, traveling between realities, or even making the ultimate sacrifice.
As long as evil is thwarted and Dundee survives, no price is too high for these guys to pay.
So even though we are drawn in by the submarine spaceships and zombie unicorns, we stay for the themes of heroism and defiance of destiny. There really is more to these albums than the absurd exterior would suggest.
Technically, the Gloryhammer saga could have ended with Legends from Beyond the Galactic Terror Vortex, but Bose has 18 more albums planned, one of which is on the way as of this video's posting. Unfortunately, there is trouble in the land of Dundee. The original lineup of Gloryhammer ran strong for 6 years. But things started to fall apart in 2021, and it all began when the conflict between Zargothrax and Angus McFife went from fiction to reality.
Rather suddenly, it was announced by the band that Thomas Winkler had left Gloryhammer. Winkler himself clarified that Bose fired him via email, and the reasons are murky at best. Official word is that Bose and Winkler had disagreements about management and business regarding the band. Rumors persist that Winkler was the problem, though rumors they remain.
Losing the frontman can be tricky enough for any band, but following Winkler's exit, an even bigger bomb went off.
First, images of private text messages were leaked that showed the band members, minus Winkler, using, let us say, offensive terminologies in conversation. Then, James Cartwright was accused by an ex-girlfriend of being abusive.
Oh, crud. People have had their entire careers nuked on the mere implication of bad behavior. Evil wizards and metal dragons are nothing compared to the wrath of cancel culture. There's no way the band could survive that.
You would think so, and yet it seems that surprisingly they did.
After a few months of silence, the band released an official statement which apologized for the coarse language in the texts, but denied the abuse allegations, and after that, it all just went away. To date, the abuse issue has not been followed up on, which could mean it wasn't true in the first place, or maybe it was just settled in private.
And as for the language used in those chats, well, it seems most people were not shocked to learn that rock stars talk like rock stars in private. Some fans were appalled, yes, but most didn't seem to care all that much.
Gloryhammer survived, brought Sozos Michael on as the new Angus McFife, and the fourth album, Return to the Kingdom of Fife, is looming on the horizon as of this video's uploading.
That's all well and good, but what happened to Thomas Winkler?
Well, as you can imagine, he didn't like getting booted out of the band, so he went off to do his own thing.
In his new project, Winkler continues playing the original Angus McFife, who, after his heroic sacrifice, escapes the underworld and gains new power by wielding the sword Sixcalibur, thus becoming Angus McSix. Now he goes on new adventures with a new crew against a new villain. Joining him in this new band are guitarist Talia Belazaka as Talestris, Queen of the Amazons, drummer Manu Lauter as Ska, the Buff Berserker, and guitarist Sebastian Seb Leverman as Archdemon Sebulon. Assuming their first album, Angus McSix and the Sword of Power, does well, we'll be seeing two competing timelines diverging from the third Gloryhammer album moving forward.
Naturally, the fandom has been split into camps since all of this happened.
Those in the Bose camp say Winkler was getting too big for his britches, while those in the Winkler camp say Bose lost them with his inappropriate behavior. There are, of course, many who don't care about backstage drama as long as the music is good, and thus will continue listening to both.
Personally, I find myself in that third camp, specifically feeling like that one guy who doesn't like that the rest of his friends are all fighting. To be honest, I can see both sides of this issue.
On the one hand, Gloryhammer is Bose's band, and he has the authority to decide what's best for it, though firing Winkler over email is about as classy as breaking up over text. On the other hand, Winkler is clearly passionate about his breakout role, and I can sympathize with his disappointment, but the lyrics of his first solo song do have me wondering about the size of his ego.
I suppose there is always a chance that Bose and Winkler might reconcile and reunite one day. I mean, if David Lee Roth and the Van Halen brothers could reconcile their differences for one last album, then anything is possible. But I would say that is a very far-off possibility at the best.
For now, though, we've got two new albums on the way that sound great so far, and the original three albums remain strong and worth listening to. There's nothing quite like them in the power metal scene, and listening to them is just plain fun.
Don't just take my word for it, though. You owe it to yourselves to give all of these albums a listen. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. So the third album is about the hero getting transported to an alternate world with a different kind of magic, and he needs to go on a quest in order to find artifacts to save the day. Oh my word, the third album is an isekai. And that just makes it even weirder.
Thank you all for watching. If you want to see us keep doing what we're doing, you might consider doing all the usual YouTube things, as well as hopping down to the description to find links to DeviantArt, Patreon, Twitter, and links for the different books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Your support is naturally appreciated. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.